Guys, we are finally back in California. As you can see, I'm using the tripod again. No more shaky cameras. Just getting into the swing of things here. We were away for 4.5 months. So I have to get my act together, cleaning things. There was no food, so we're buying food. And so it's just a quick video. But the thing that I am excited about is the move of the glory of God. For many years, when my wife and I started into ministry in the 1990s, no one was prophesying. The thing of hearing God's voice and moving in the Spirit was a very rare thing. Now everybody gets visions, everybody gets prophecies, and it's really exciting. And as I told you, though prophecies and visions are very important because they give destiny. Part of what prophecy from God does is to give destiny. It's not just a future event. A prophecy from the Lord is always encouraging, it's always loving, it's not condemning. It's always done with a spirit of humility, and it imparts destiny and vision to people. Many times we'll prophesy to people that don't have a destiny. You ask them, what, even you here, I ask you, what are your spiritual gifts? What is your calling? What is your vision? What have you been birthed by God to do? Most people tell me, I don't know. So part of what prophecy does, prophecy releases to people from God's perspective, through God's voice, from God's mind, what God has created that person for. What is the calling that the person has? And when you start to impart that destiny of God to people, then people can start to move into it. People see things happen. So that's one thing that we're doing. But we're not going to talk about prophecy today. The next move of God, as I told you, is the glory of God. In spiritual gifts, it is people ministering by the voice of God, for God, but it's people. In the glory, it's God who is ministering. And getting into the glory is a lot deeper work, because when you're getting into a place where it's God who's moving, it's God who's ministering, and He's ministering not just in prophecy, He's ministering in signs and wonders. And this is why we tell people that the next move of God has to be the glory, because prophecy is not enough to focus the attention of a very distracted world, of a very busy world that has social media, that has a lot of stuff going on. So it's a lot deeper work. You have to get into a point in the glory where your whole life is just a focus on the voice of God, on going deeper and deeper with God. And one of the things about the glory is that everything happens by faith. Whereas we had faith to believe, to get a word, now we have to have faith to believe that we're going to see God's glory. Now, for examples of God's glory, I've been reading some books by, let's say today, by Ruth Heflin. Ruth Heflin was a woman, I think she was a pioneer of being used in the glory of God. And she talks a lot about gold dust, and I've seen gold dust. Gold dust is a manifestation of God's glory. It's when little freckles of gold, of heavenly gold, start to fall on people's faces or on people's bodies. I've seen it before. I've seen it, especially when I prayed for one person. She got full of gold sparkles on her forehead. Now you say, well, what are the gold flakes for? I don't know. I used to criticize gold flakes, but now I see it as a manifestation of God's glory. So, or oil coming out of people's hands. She talks about oil. Matter of fact, we did a meeting back in California, and I was believing for the glory, and I felt that my hands were, the palms of my hands were getting not moist, but I felt soft. I felt that at any moment there could be a mist of oil. The other thing is what is called the Shekinah glory of God, which is a cloud or a mist And we see that cloud in the Old Testament many times in the wanderings of the Israelites through the desert. God would show up as a cloud. So in the services, a cloud comes. As a matter of fact, in the service on Friday, I started to see a mist that lasted for a while in the atmosphere. It was kind of a hazy mist, and that's the beginning of the glory cloud. Ruth Heflin talks that when the gold dust came, that people's fillings, silver fillings in their mouth were being turned from like silver to gold, and healing started to take place. And so, again, you're always gonna get critics saying, "Well, you know what? This thing about the oil and like the gold dust, I don't care about that. I don't care about the critics." What I'm trying to say is that there's a level of seeing signs and wonders it's a level of faith that's much greater than the level of faith to get a prophecy. I feel pretty comfortable that wherever I'm going to go, God's going to give me a word, a vision for somebody. That's pretty much, after prophesying to thousands of people throughout the world, I can almost, by the grace of God, because God does it so far, I can get to any person and get a vision, get a word. I flow in it. Now, but to see God, I want to see gold dust follow me, or I want to see the midst of the cloud. Because the thing about the gold dust, it's not the gold dust, but when the gold dust shows up, there is an anointing. Or when oil shows up on people's hands, there's an anointing on the oil, and people start to see healing. It's not the oil, but it's what happens with the oil. It's not the gold dust, but it's what God does after the gold dust comes. In many reports where the gold dust shows up, or where the oil shows up on people's hands, there is a rash of healings and miracles and healings that take place. So it's not that I'm seeking for the gold dust as much, though I think it's a sign to people, or I'm seeking for the oil, I think it's a sign to people, but I'm seeking, as when those things manifest, what God does. So in the meeting on Friday, I started to really believe. I started to believe, God, I'm going to believe. You know, it takes a real focus to say, God, you know what? I'm going to believe, because God wants us to expect more. Our whole life should be more of expecting an impossibility in everything that we do. Every impossible situation that man tells you it's impossible, we should start to believe that God's going to show up and make it possible. So it's this whole thing of believing for the impossible. Believing that in a meeting I'm going to see gold dust. Believing that in a meeting the Shekinah cloud glory of God is going to show up. Believing that oil is going to come out of my hands. That when I pray for like people, signs and wonders are going to happen. Believing that people are going to get healed from cancer. So it takes a much deeper level of believing and going deeper, because faith is in Jesus Christ. And the deeper that you go into the Spirit, the more faith that is released. So one way to release more and more faith is by just deeper and deeper and like worshiping and like worshiping. So I really believe that these are the things that happen. Well, I think I heard a knock on the door. I'm not sure. So I have to get it. Okay. And my wife is calling me. Bye-bye.